The mare's scream tore through the dusty corral like a knife through silk, and Jenna Zimmerman pressed herself harder against the barn wall, her own heart thundering in time with the horse's panicked hooves. She had traveled all the way from Philadelphia to this desolate patch of Nevada territory in the spring of 1876, fleeing a past that still made her flinch at sudden movements and raised voices, only to find that fear had followed her like a shadow she could not shake. The horse, a beautiful sorrel with a white blaze down her face, had been brought into the makeshift ranch outside Pahrump just 3 days before Jenna arrived, and watching the animal's terror was like staring into a mirror that reflected her own shattered soul. "Easy now, nobody's going to hurt you," came a low voice from across the corral, steady as bedrock and twice as solid. Jenna's eyes found the source of that voice, and she saw him for the first time. He stood in the center of the pen, not moving toward the frightened horse, not approaching at all. Just standing there with his hands loose at his sides, his hat tilted back enough that she could see his face in the harsh morning sunlight. He was young, probably not more than 25, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His name was Garrett Vance, though she would not learn that until later. What she noticed first was the absolute stillness in him, the patience radiating from every line of his lean body. The horse trembled at the far side of the corral, sweat darkening her coat, eyes rolling white with terror. Jenna knew that look. She had seen it in her own eyes every morning for the past 6 months. "You can take all the time you need," Garrett said, still not moving. "I'll be right here." Jenna's employer, Mrs. Patricia Henderson, had been watching from the ranch house porch. She walked over to where Jenna stood, her practical skirt stirring up small clouds of dust. Patricia was a widow in her 50s who ran the boarding house in Pahrump and owned a small piece of land outside town where she kept a few animals. She had hired Jenna sight unseen, based solely on a letter of recommendation from a sympathetic preacher back east who knew Jenna needed to disappear. "That's Garrett Vance," Patricia said quietly. "Best hand with horses I've ever seen. Man brought that mare in, said she'd been beaten something terrible by her previous owner. Said she was worthless, mean-spirited. Garrett offered to take her off his hands for free, said he'd prove the man wrong." "How long will it take?" Jenna asked, unable to tear her eyes away from the scene. Patricia shrugged. "However long it takes, that's how Garrett works. He doesn't break horses, he gentles them. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes weeks, but when he's done, they'd follow him through fire." They stood watching as the minutes stretched on. Garrett did not move. The horse did not calm, but she stopped running. She stood there shaking, watching him with those terrified eyes, and he simply waited. There was something profound in that patience, something that made Jenna's throat tight. Eventually, Patricia touched Jenna's arm. "Come on, dear. We have work to do. The morning stage will be arriving soon, and those passengers will want breakfast." Jenna followed her employer back to the ranch house, but she kept glancing over her shoulder at the man and the horse. She had come to Nevada territory seeking silence and solitude, a place to hide from the memories of Marcus Thornton, the Philadelphia banker's son who had courted her with poetry and promises, then revealed himself to be a monster once they were engaged. She had barely escaped that engagement with her life, and the shame of what she had endured had driven her across the country to this dusty nowhere town where nobody knew her story. The work at Patricia's boarding house was hard but blessedly simple. Jenna cooked, cleaned, changed linens, and served meals to the rotating cast of travelers who passed through Pahrump on their way to somewhere else. The town itself was small, positioned along the route between the mining camps to the north and the larger settlements to the south. It boasted a general store, a saloon, a church that doubled as a schoolhouse, and not much else. The landscape was harsh and beautiful in equal measure, all red rock and scrub brush and endless sky. That first week, Jenna found excuses to pass by the corral whenever she could. Garrett was always there working with the mare. He never rushed, never showed frustration when the horse shied away from him. He simply existed in her space, gradually making himself familiar, letting her grow accustomed to his presence. By the third day, the mare would approach within a few feet of him before her fear sent her skittering away. By the fifth day, she let him stand close enough to talk to her in that low, steady voice. "You've been hurt, I know," Jenna heard him say one morning when she passed by with a basket of washing. "Someone taught you that hands mean pain, but I'm going to teach you different. I'm going to show you that not all hands hurt, not all voices yell. You just have to trust me, girl. Just a little bit at a time." The words hit Jenna like a physical blow. She stood frozen on the path, the basket growing heavy in her arms. The mare was standing very close to Garrett now, her nose stretched toward him, nostrils flaring as she took in his scent. When he slowly, carefully raised his hand, the horse flinched backward. Garrett did not follow. He simply lowered his hand and waited. "That's all right," he said. "We'll try again tomorrow." It was then that Garrett turned and saw Jenna watching. Their eyes met across the dusty yard, and something passed between them in that moment, some wordless recognition. His eyes were brown, she noticed, a warm amber brown that reminded her of honey in sunlight. He touched the brim of his hat in a polite greeting, and she quickly looked away, hurrying toward the clothesline with her face burning. That evening, Garrett came to the boarding house for supper. Patricia served meals family style at a long table in the dining room, and Jenna usually helped carry out the platters of food before retreating to the kitchen to eat alone. But Patricia insisted she sit with them that night, saying they were short on guests, and there was no reason for Jenna to hide away. So Jenna found herself seated at the table with Patricia, Garrett, and two traveling merchants who talked loudly about the price of goods in California. Jenna kept her eyes on her plate, acutely aware of Garrett sitting across from her. She could feel his gaze occasionally drifting in her direction, but whenever she glanced up, he was always looking elsewhere. "How's the mare coming along?" Patricia asked Garrett. "Making progress," he said. "She let me touch her nose today just for a second. Tomorrow I'll try again." "You've got the patience of Job," one of the merchants said with a laugh. "I'd have given up on an animal like that days ago." Garrett's jaw tightened slightly. "She's not an animal like that. She's a good horse who's been treated badly. There's a difference." The merchant shrugged, clearly not interested in debating the point, and the conversation moved on to other topics. But Jenna had noticed the flash of something protective in Garrett's voice, a fierceness that came from genuine caring. It made her want to look at him more closely, to understand what kind of man spoke that way about a frightened horse. After dinner, Jenna was clearing the plates when Garrett approached her in the kitchen. She nearly dropped the stack of dishes she was holding. "Sorry, I did not mean to startle you," he said quickly, holding up his hands in a peaceable gesture. "I just wanted to thank you for the meal. Best cooking I've had in months." "Oh, thank you." Jenna's voice came out smaller than she intended. She set the dishes down carefully, keeping the table between them. Garrett seemed to notice her wariness. He took a small step back, giving her more space. "I've seen you watching me work with the mare," he said. "If you're interested in horses, you're welcome to come closer. She might benefit from having another calm presence around." "I do not know anything about horses," Jenna said. "That's all right. You don't need to. Just being there can help sometimes. Animals can sense things about people. They know who's safe and who's not." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentler. "I've noticed she's calmer when you're nearby. Maybe she recognizes something in you." Jenna's breath caught. She wanted to ask what he meant by that, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she just nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Garrett smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his whole face. "Good night, Miss Zimmerman. I'll see you tomorrow." He left, and Jenna stood alone in the kitchen, her hands shaking as she washed the dishes. She did not understand what was happening to her. This man was a stranger, and yet something about his presence made her feel both terrified and strangely safe at the same time. It was confusing and overwhelming, and she wanted to run from it. But she also wanted to go back to that corral tomorrow and watch him work. The next morning, Jenna finished her chores earlier than usual and found herself walking toward the corral with her heart in her throat. Garrett was already there, standing a few feet from the mare, talking to her in that low, soothing voice. When he saw Jenna approaching, he waved her over. "Come on in," he said. "Move slow and quiet and don't look her directly in the eye. That can feel threatening to a frightened animal." Jenna slipped between the fence rails and walked carefully to where Garrett stood. Up close, she could see the fine scars on his hands, the calluses earned from years of hard work. He smelled like leather and sage and clean sweat, not unpleasant at all. "Just stand here with me," he said. "Let her get used to you." They stood together in silence, and Jenna felt her racing heartbeat begin to slow. The morning air was cool, and the sky was the pale blue of turquoise stone. The mare watched them from several feet away, her ears swiveling nervously. "What's her name?" Jenna asked after a while. "Do not have one for her yet," Garrett said. "Figured I'd let her tell me when she was ready." "How will she tell you? I'll know." He glanced at Jenna. "What brought you all the way out to Nevada territory, if you don't mind me asking?" "Philadelphia is a long way from here." Jenna stiffened. "Mrs. Henderson told you where I'm from," she mentioned it. "I'm sorry, I did not mean to pry. You do not have to answer." But Jenna found, surprisingly, that she wanted to answer, or at least part of the truth. "I needed a fresh start." "Somewhere nobody knew me." Garrett nodded slowly. "I understand that. I came out here for similar reasons 3 years ago. Sometimes a person needs to leave the past behind and start over." "Does it work?" Jenna asked. "Starting over, some days yes, some days no. But it's easier out here where there's space to breathe. Back in Missouri, I felt like the walls were always closing in. Here, you can see for miles in every direction. Gives a person room to figure out who they really are." Jenna considered this. She had been so focused on escaping what she had left behind that she had not thought much about who she might become. The idea was both frightening and exhilarating. "Look," Garrett said softly, drawing her attention back to the present. The mare had taken 3 cautious steps toward them. Her neck was extended, her nose quivering as she tested the air. Garrett very slowly extended his hand, palm down, not reaching toward her but simply offering. The mare took another step, then another. And then, so gently it was almost imperceptible, she touched her nose to his hand. Jenna held her breath. Garrett did not move, did not try to pet the horse or grab her halter. He just let her investigate his hand, let her learn that this touch did not bring pain. After a long moment, the mare pulled back, but she did not run away. She simply stood there, watching them with eyes that seemed marginally less afraid. "Good girl," Garrett murmured. "That's my good girl." Something in Jenna's chest cracked open at those words, at the tenderness in his voice. She realized she was crying, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She tried to wipe them away quickly, but Garrett had already noticed. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I do not know why I am crying." "Do not apologize," Garrett said. "There's no shame in tears. Sometimes healing hurts worse than the original wound." He said it so matter-of-factly, with such certainty, that Jenna knew he spoke from experience. She wanted to ask what had wounded him, what had driven him from Missouri to this harsh Nevada landscape, but she did not have the courage yet. They stood together until the mare wandered away to investigate a patch of dried grass on the other side of the corral. Then Garrett walked Jenna back to the fence. "Thank you for being here," he said. "You helped, whether you realize it or not." "I did not do anything," Jenna protested. "You were present. You were calm. That matters more than you know." He hesitated, then added, "Would you like to come back tomorrow? I think she's starting to trust us." Jenna nodded, not trusting her voice. She did want to come back, more than she had wanted anything in a long time. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine developed. Jenna would finish her morning chores at the boarding house and then spend an hour or two at the corral with Garrett and the mare. At first, they mostly stood in silence, letting the horse grow accustomed to their presence. But gradually, Garrett began to talk, telling Jenna about his methods for gentling horses, about reading their body language, about earning trust through consistency and patience. "It is all about making yourself predictable," he explained one day. "A frightened animal needs to know what to expect. If you are always calm, always gentle, always honest in your movements, eventually they learn they can rely on you. It is the same with people, I think." Jenna thought about Marcus, about how he had been charming and unpredictable, how she had never known which version of him she would encounter from one day to the next. The comparison made her shiver. "Are you cold?" Garrett asked immediately, starting to shrug off his jacket. "No, I am fine." "Just a memory." He stopped, understanding crossing his face. He did not press her to explain, and she was grateful for that. The mare, whom Garrett had started calling Red for her sorrel coat, was making remarkable progress. She now approached them readily, allowed Garrett to stroke her neck and face, and had even begun following him around the corral like a puppy. Jenna had been permitted to touch Red a few times, and the feeling of the horse's soft nose against her palm had brought unexpected joy. But there were still triggers. A sudden movement could send Red skittering to the far corner of the pen. The sight of a rope made her tremble. One afternoon, one of the traveling merchants came too close to the corral fence and raised his voice, and Red reared up in blind panic, nearly trampling Garrett before he could calm her down. Jenna had run into the corral without thinking, putting herself between the merchant and the frightened horse, her own fear forgotten in the need to protect Red. Garrett had grabbed her arm and pulled her to safety, and they had ended up pressed together against the fence, both breathing hard while Red circled the pen in distress. "You could have been hurt," Garrett said, his voice rough with concern. His hands were still on her arms, steadying her. "So could you," Jenna countered. "And it was that man's fault, yelling like that." Garrett had turned and said something sharp to the merchant, who wandered off muttering about crazy women and useless animals. Then Garrett had looked down at Jenna, really looked at her, and she had seen something shift in his expression. "You are braver than you think," he said quietly. "I am not brave at all. I am afraid of everything. Being afraid and doing it anyway, that is the definition of brave." His thumb brushed against her arm, possibly without him even realizing it. "You ran toward danger to protect something you cared about. That is not the action of a coward." Jenna's heart was pounding, and she was suddenly intensely aware of how close they were standing, how his hands felt warm even through her sleeves, how his eyes had flecks of gold in them that she had never noticed before. She pulled away gently, confused by the rush of feelings she did not know how to name. "I should get back to the house," she said. "Mrs. Henderson will need help with dinner." She fled before he could respond, and spent the rest of the day in a state of agitation that Patricia definitely noticed, but kindly did not mention. That night, Jenna lay in her small room under the eaves and thought about Garrett's hands on her arms, about the way he had looked at her. Marcus had touched her too, had looked at her with desire, but it had always felt like being hunted. Garrett's touch had felt like being protected. The difference was profound and terrifying and wonderful all at once. She thought about Red, about the way the mare had learned to trust again despite everything she had suffered. Was it possible for Jenna to do the same? Could she learn to let someone close without flinching, without waiting for the blow to fall? The questions kept her awake long into the night. The next morning, Garrett was waiting for her at the corral with an unusual expression on his face, something between nervous and excited. "I want to try something today," he said, "if you are willing." "What is it?" "I want you to be the one to put a halter on Red, not me. You." Jenna took a step back. "I cannot do that. I do not know how." "I will teach you. And Red trusts you. I can see it. I think it might be good for both of you." "What if I do it wrong? What if I scare her?" Garrett stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Then we'll stop and try again another day. But Jenna, I think you can do this. I have watched you with her. You are careful and patient and kind. She knows that." The way he said her name sent warmth spreading through her chest. He had started using her first name a few days ago, and she had started calling him Garrett instead of Mr. Vance, and it had felt like crossing some invisible threshold into deeper territory. "All right," she heard herself say. "I will try." Garrett's smile was like sunrise. He retrieved a soft rope halter from the fence post and showed her how to hold it, how to approach Red at an angle rather than head-on, how to let the mare sniff the halter first so it would not be unfamiliar. "Talk to her," he instructed. "Let her hear your voice." Jenna took a shaky breath and walked slowly toward Red. The mare's ears swiveled toward her, tracking her movement. "Hello, sweet girl," Jenna said, her voice trembling only slightly. "I have something for you. It is not going to hurt, I promise." "Garrett says it is just so we can take you for walks outside the corral, let you see more of the world." Red stood very still, watching Jenna approach. When Jenna was close enough to touch, she extended her hand the way Garrett had taught her, letting Red sniff her palm. Then, moving very slowly, she brought the halter up. Red's eyes widened and Jenna felt the mare tense. "It is all right," Jenna whispered. "I know you are scared. I am scared too of so many things, but we are safe here. Garrett keeps us safe." She said it without thinking, but as the words left her mouth, she realized they were true. She did feel safe with Garrett in a way she had not felt safe with anyone in a very long time. Red's tension eased slightly. Jenna lifted the halter higher, slipping it over the mare's nose, then gently bringing the strap behind her ears. Red flinched but did not pull away. Jenna's hands were shaking as she buckled the halter, but she managed it, and then she was standing there with Red fully haltered for the first time, and the mare was calm. "You did it," Garrett said from behind her, and the pride in his voice made Jenna want to cry again. She turned to look at him, her hand still on Red's neck. "I did it. You sure did. I knew you could." That afternoon, Garrett led Red out of the corral for the first time, and Jenna walked on the mare's other side, her hand resting lightly on Red's shoulder. They walked slowly around the property, letting Red investigate new sights and smells, and the whole time Jenna felt like she was floating. This creature that had been so broken, so terrified, was now walking freely between them, choosing to trust. If Red could heal, maybe Jenna could too. That thought stayed with her through the following days and weeks. Spring deepened into early summer, and the Nevada landscape transformed in subtle ways. Wildflowers bloomed in impossible places, adding splashes of color to the dusty terrain. The days grew longer and hotter, and Jenna's skin turned golden from time spent outdoors. She and Garrett had fallen into an easy companionship that felt natural as breathing. They talked about everything and nothing. The weather, the travelers who passed through the boarding house, books they had read, dreams they had harbored as children. Garrett told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, about a father who believed in beating discipline into his sons, about leaving home at 16 with nothing but a horse and determination. "I swore I would never be like him," Garrett said one evening as they sat on the corral fence watching red graze. "My father, I mean. He thought fear was the best teacher, but all it taught me was how to hide my true self. When I started working with horses, I discovered there was another way. Patience, consistency, gentleness. Those things build real trust, not just compliance born of fear." Jenna understood exactly what he meant. "My mother always said I should be grateful Marcus Thornton wanted to marry me," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "He was from a good family, had money and prospects. She said I was lucky." It was the first time she had spoken Marcus's name aloud since coming to Nevada. Garrett did not react with shock or pity, just listened. "He was charming at first," Jenna continued, staring out at the darkening sky. "Brought me flowers, wrote me poetry. Everyone said we made a handsome couple. But after we got engaged, things changed. He became possessive, controlling. He would grab my arm hard enough to bruise if I talked to another man. He told me what to wear, who I could see, what I could think. And when I tried to break the engagement, She stopped, her throat closing up. Garrett's hand found hers on the fence rail, his touch warm and grounding. "You do not have to tell me if you do not want to." But Jenna found that she did want to. She needed to say it aloud, to give voice to the thing that had driven her across the country. "He came to my house late one night. My parents were at the theater. He was drunk and angry, and he said I belonged to him, that I had no right to leave him. He hit me, more than once. I fought back, managed to get away and lock myself in my room. My parents came home to find me hysterical and Marcus passed out in the parlor. Even then, my mother wanted me to forgive him, to give him another chance. But I knew if I stayed, he would kill me eventually. So I wrote to some distant cousins out west, claimed I wanted an adventure, and when my father refused to help me leave, I took money from the household accounts and bought a train ticket with a forged letter of permission." She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. Garrett squeezed her hand gently. "I am so sorry that happened to you," he said, "and I am proud of you for leaving, for saving yourself. That took tremendous courage. I do not feel courageous, I feel broken." "You are not broken," Garrett's voice was fierce. "You are healing, which is different. Broken things cannot grow, cannot change. But you are changing, Jenna. I see it every day. You are stronger than you believe." She looked at him then, really looked at him in the fading light, and saw nothing but honesty in his face. He believed what he was saying. He saw something in her that she could not yet see in herself. "How do you know?" she whispered. "Because I have been where you are. Different circumstances, but the same feelings. After I left Missouri, I spent years thinking I was too damaged to ever have a normal life. But time and distance helped. Working with horses helped. They taught me that gentleness is not weakness, that healing takes as long as it takes, that trust can be rebuilt even after it has been shattered." He paused, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "And you have helped me see that I am not as alone as I thought I was." Something shifted between them in that moment, some wall that had been holding them at arm's length crumbling into dust. Jenna turned her hand over so their palms pressed together, fingers interlacing. "I am glad I came here," she said. "I am glad I met you." "I am glad too," Garrett said softly. They sat like that until full dark, hands clasped, shoulders touching, while Red dozed in the corral behind them and the stars emerged one by one overhead. Jenna felt something unfurl in her chest, something tender and terrifying that she was not quite ready to name, but that felt suspiciously like hope. The next few weeks brought changes to Pahrump that rippled through the small community. A group of prospectors came through town with stories of a promising silver vein in the hills to the north, and suddenly the saloon was packed with men looking to try their luck. The boarding house was full every night, which meant Jenna had more work than ever, but she did not mind. The busier she was, the less time she had to overthink the growing feelings she had for Garrett, because there was no denying it anymore. She was falling in love with him. It was there in the way her heart lifted every time she saw him, in the way his smile could brighten her entire day, in the way she felt safe and seen and valued in his presence. But love also brought fear. What if she was making another mistake? What if she was misreading him? What if he hurt her the way Marcus had? Garrett, for his part, seemed to be wrestling with his own conflicts. Jenna caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her breath catch, but he never acted on it. He was unfailingly respectful, always careful not to touch her without permission, always giving her space to retreat if she needed it. It was exactly what she needed, and yet part of her wished he would just take the leap, make the first move so she would not have to. One afternoon in late June, everything changed. A man rode into town on a lathered horse, asking after Jenna Zimmerman. Patricia came to find her in the kitchen, her face tight with concern. "There is someone here asking for you. He says he is from Philadelphia, says his name is Thornton." The wooden spoon Jenna had been holding clattered to the floor. "No, no, he cannot be here. That is impossible." But it was not impossible because Marcus Thornton was standing in Patricia's parlor, looking travel-worn and determined. He was as handsome as Jenna remembered, with his carefully groomed hair and expensive clothes, but now she could see the cruelty in the set of his mouth, the coldness in his blue eyes. "Jenna, darling," he said when she appeared in the doorway, "I have come to bring you home." "I am home," Jenna said, her voice shaking. "You need to leave. Do not be ridiculous. You have had your little adventure, but it is time to come back to Philadelphia where you belong. Your parents are worried sick." "My parents helped you find me." The betrayal cut deep. "They want what is best for you, as do I." Marcus took a step toward her, and Jenna instinctively stepped back. "I forgive you for running away, for the things you said about me. I know you are not in your right mind, but we can put all that behind us now. I am not going anywhere with you." Marcus's expression hardened. "You do not have a choice, Jenna. You are still legally my fiancée, and you stole money from your father. I could have you arrested." Before Jenna could respond, Garrett appeared in the doorway behind Marcus. He must have seen the strange horse and come to investigate. His eyes went immediately to Jenna, taking in her pale face and shaking hands, and his whole demeanor changed. He became someone Jenna had never seen before, dangerous, protective, ready to fight. "The lady told you to leave," Garrett said, his voice low and cold. "I suggest you listen." Marcus turned to assess this new threat. He looked Garrett up and down dismissively, taking in the dusty work clothes and calloused hands. "And who might you be? The stable boy. I am the man telling you to get out of this house and off this property. Now, this does not concern you, Cowboy. This is between me and my fiancée." "She is not your fiancée," Garrett said, moving to stand beside Jenna. "She does not want you here. That is all that matters." Marcus laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "You think I am going to listen to some nobody ranch hand? I am taking Jenna back to Philadelphia where she belongs, and if you try to stop me, I will have the law on you so fast your head will spin." "Then go get the law," Garrett said. "In fact, I will walk you to the sheriff's office myself. We can all have a conversation about what happens to men who beat women." Marcus's face went red. "She has been telling stories about me. Typical. She always was prone to hysterics and exaggeration. Get out." Garrett's hand had moved to the gun at his hip, not drawing it, just resting there in a way that made his message clear. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Jenna held her breath, terrified that this would escalate into violence. But finally, Marcus looked away. "This is not over, Jenna," he said. "Your parents expect you home within the month. I will be back with the proper authorities." He stormed out, and they heard his horse gallop away. Jenna's legs gave out, and she would have fallen if Garrett had not caught her. He helped her to a chair, then knelt in front of her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Breathe," he said. "You are safe. I am right here." Jenna gulped air, fighting down panic. "He found me. I thought I was far enough away, but he found me. And he is gone now. I will not let him hurt you, Jenna. I promise you that." Patricia appeared with a glass of water, and Jenna drank it gratefully. Her hands were still shaking so badly that some of the water sloshed onto her dress. "I need to go to the sheriff," Jenna said. "I need to tell him what Marcus did, get some kind of protection." "We will go right now," Garrett said. "Patricia, can you spare her for an hour, of course? Take all the time you need." The sheriff's office was in the center of town, a small building that also served as the jail. Sheriff Tom Bradshaw was a weathered man in his 50s who had seen his share of trouble. He listened carefully as Jenna explained the situation, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. "The problem is, it is your word against his," Bradshaw said when she finished. "And if he comes back with some kind of legal document from Pennsylvania claiming you are engaged and took money from your family, that could complicate things." "So there is nothing you can do?" Jenna asked, despair rising in her throat. "I did not say that. I said it is complicated. But I can make sure Mr. Thornton understands that you are under the protection of this town, and if he tries anything, he will answer to me. In the meantime, I would suggest you write to your parents, make it clear you broke the engagement legally and you are not returning." "They will not listen. They never did before." Garrett, who had been standing behind Jenna's chair, placed a hand on her shoulder. What if she was not engaged to Thornton because she was engaged to someone else? Everyone turned to stare at him. Jenna's heart stopped. "What are you saying?" The sheriff asked. "I am saying that if Jenna was engaged to me, legitimately, then Thornton would have no claim on her whatsoever. An engagement is not legally binding if one party has entered into another engagement in good faith." "Garrett," Jenna whispered, but he squeezed her shoulder gently. "If you would be willing," he said, looking down at her with those steady brown eyes. "I know this is not how anyone dreams of getting engaged and you do not have to say yes, but if it would help protect you, I would be honored to call you my fiancé. For real, not just on paper." Jenna's mind was spinning. This was insane. They had only known each other for 2 months. But as she looked up at Garrett, she realized that in those 2 months, she had learned more about him than she had ever known about Marcus in a year of courtship. She knew that Garrett was patient and kind and gentle. She knew he would never raise a hand to her in anger. She knew he saw her as a person, not a possession. And she knew that what she felt for him was real and deep and nothing like what she had felt for Marcus. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I am sure. I have been wanting to ask you for weeks, but I did not want to rush you. This is not exactly the proposal I had planned, but the sentiment is genuine, Jenna. I care about you. I want to protect you. And I would very much like to see where this could go between us if you are willing." Jenna stood, turning to face him fully. Her heart was pounding, but for the first time in months it was not from fear. It was from hope, from the terrifying exhilaration of taking a leap into the unknown. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Garrett's face lit up like the sun, and he took her hands in his, careful and reverent. "You will not regret this, I promise you." Sheriff Bradshaw cleared his throat. "Well, that settles that. I will make a note of the engagement in my records. If Thornton comes back, I will make sure he understands the situation. And Miss Zimmerman, I would suggest you do right to your parents, make this official on that end too." They thanked the sheriff and walked out into the bright afternoon sunlight. Jenna felt dizzy, overwhelmed by how quickly everything had changed. An hour ago she had been kneading bread dough. Now she was engaged to Garrett Vance. "Are you all right?" Garrett asked as they walked slowly back toward the boarding house. "I think so. This is a lot to take in." "I know it is." "And Jenna, I meant what I said in there. This is not just for show, not to me, but I also do not want you to feel pressured. We can take things as slowly as you need. The engagement can be as long as you want. There is no rush." Jenna stopped walking and turned to face him. "Did you mean it? That you have been wanting to ask me for weeks?" "Yes. I have been falling for you since the first day you stood in that corral with me, when you cried watching Red touch my hand. You are strong and brave and kind, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore." "I have been falling for you too," Jenna admitted. "It terrified me because the last time I fell for someone it ended so badly. But you are nothing like Marcus. You are everything good and patient and honest. You make me feel safe." Garrett lifted one hand very slowly and cupped her cheek. She leaned into his touch instead of flinching away, and the look of wonder on his face made her chest ache. "Can I kiss you?" he asked softly. Jenna's breath hitched. "I want you to, but I am nervous." "Then we will go slow, and if you want to stop at any point, you just say the word." He leaned in gradually, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When his lips finally touched hers, it was the gentlest kiss Jenna had ever experienced, soft and sweet, and asking nothing more than she was ready to give. She felt his hand tremble against her face, and realized he was just as nervous as she was, just as awed by this moment. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. "That was nice," Jenna said, and Garrett laughed. "Nice is good. I can work with nice." They walked the rest of the way to the boarding house holding hands, and when they arrived, Patricia took one look at them and knew immediately that something had changed. "Well," she said with a satisfied smile, "it is about time." Word of the engagement spread through Pahrump faster than wildfire. By evening, everyone in town seemed to know that Jenna Zimmerman and Garrett Vance were planning to marry. People stopped by the boarding house to offer congratulations, and the general store owner promised Jenna credit for wedding supplies whenever she needed it. That night, after the dinner dishes were washed and put away, Jenna and Garrett sat on the porch steps and watched the stars emerge. Red was visible in the corral, a peaceful shadow in the gathering dark. "I should write to my parents," Jenna said. "Get that over with." "Do you want help with the letter?" "No, I need to do it myself." "They need to hear from me that I am serious about this, about staying here and building a new life." Garrett nodded. "For what it is worth, I think they were wrong to side with Thornton. A parent's first duty is to protect their child, not sacrifice them for social standing. My mother always cared more about appearances than happiness. She married my father because he was from the right family, and I do not think she has ever been truly content. She wanted the same for me, I suppose. The appearance of a good marriage, even if the reality was miserable." "You deserve better than that. You deserve to be happy." "So do you," Jenna said, squeezing his hand. "Tell me about your dreams, Garrett. What do you want for the future?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I want my own ranch someday. Nothing huge, just enough land to raise horses properly. I want to build a reputation for gentling difficult horses, help animals like Red find their way back to trust. And I want a family. A wife and children, a home filled with laughter and love, the opposite of what I grew up with." "That sounds beautiful," Jenna said. "What about you? What do you want?" Jenna had never let herself dream beyond escape, beyond survival. But sitting here with Garrett, she allowed herself to imagine a future. "I want to feel safe. I want to wake up without fear every morning. I want to have a home where I belong, where I can be myself without judgment. And I want to help you with the horses. I have grown to love working with Red, seeing her heal. I think I would like to do more of that. We could do it together, Garrett said. Build something together. Yes. I would like that. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Garrett said, I should probably let you get some rest. It has been a long day. It has, Jenna agreed, but she did not want him to leave. She wanted to stay in this moment, in this feeling of peace and possibility. As if sensing her thoughts, Garrett leaned over and kissed her forehead. I will see you in the morning. Sleep well, Jenna. Good night, Garrett. She watched him walk toward the small cabin he rented on the edge of town, and then went inside to write the hardest letter of her life. Dear Mother and Father, I am writing to inform you that I will not be returning to Philadelphia. I have broken my engagement to Marcus Thornton, a decision I made months ago, and one I stand by completely. He had no right to follow me here, and I would appreciate it if you would not give him any further information about my whereabouts. I am engaged to be married to a good man named Garrett Vance. He is honest, kind, and hardworking, and he treats me with the respect and tenderness I deserve. We will be married within the next few months, and I would welcome your blessing, though I no longer require your permission. I am building a life here in Nevada territory, and I am happier than I have been in years. I hope someday you will understand why I had to leave, and why I can never come back. Your daughter, Jenna. She sealed the letter before she could second-guess herself and left it on Patricia's desk to be posted in the morning. Then she climbed the stairs to her room, changed into her nightgown, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She was engaged to Garrett. The reality of it kept hitting her in waves. She was going to marry him, build a life with him. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. What if she was not ready? What if her fear made her a bad wife? What if the trauma from Marcus never fully healed? But then she thought about the way Garrett had gentled Red, with patience and consistency and time. He had said healing takes as long as it takes. Maybe marriage could be part of her healing, not something that had to wait until she was perfectly whole. Maybe they could heal together. That thought settled something in her, and she finally fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next weeks were a blur of preparation and anticipation. Jenna and Garrett decided on a simple ceremony to take place in mid-August, giving them time to make basic arrangements, but not so long that Marcus could cause trouble. Patricia was overjoyed and immediately began planning, enlisting the help of the other women in town. Garrett continued working with Red, and Jenna joined him whenever she could. The mare had progressed to the point where she could be ridden, and Garrett took Jenna on her first horseback ride, with Jenna on Red and Garrett on his own horse, a steady gelding named Copper. They rode out into the desert, following a wash that cut through the red rock landscape. The morning sun turned everything golden, and Jenna felt free in a way she had never experienced before. Riding Red, who trusted her completely with Garrett beside her and open sky overhead, she felt like a different person from the frightened girl who had fled Philadelphia. "This is incredible," she called to Garrett. He grinned at her. "Just wait. I want to show you something." He led her up a narrow trail that wound between towering rock formations. At the top, the desert spread out before them in every direction, vast and beautiful and unforgiving. In the distance, purple mountains rose against the bright sky. "This is where I come when I need to think," Garrett said. "There is something about seeing the world from up here that puts everything in perspective. Our problems seem smaller. Our possibilities seem bigger." Jenna understood exactly what he meant. From up here, Marcus and Philadelphia and all the pain of the past felt very far away. They dismounted and sat on a flat rock, and Garrett pulled out a canteen and some biscuits Patricia had packed for them. As they ate, Garrett said, "I have been thinking about what we talked about, building a ranch together. I have been saving money for years, and I think I have almost enough to buy some land. There is a property about 5 miles north of here near a good water source. The owner is looking to sell. I was thinking we could look at it together, see if it might work for us." "Really? You want my opinion?" "Of course I do. This would be our home, our future. I want you to love it as much as I do." The idea that her opinion mattered, that she would be an equal partner in building this life, made Jenna's eyes sting with happy tears. "I would love to see it." They rode out to the property the next day. It was beautiful in a stark way, with a small cabin that needed work, a good well, and flat grazing land surrounded by rocky hills. Jenna could picture horses running free here, could imagine building corrals and a bigger house, creating something lasting. "I love it," she told Garrett. "I think we could make something wonderful here." His smile could have lit up the whole desert. "Then I will talk to the owner tomorrow. With any luck, this will be ours by the wedding." As they rode back to town, Jenna felt something settle in her chest. This was really happening. She was starting over, building a new life with a good man who saw her as a partner. It felt like a dream, but the steady warmth of the sun and the solid reality of red beneath her confirmed it was all real. 2 weeks before the wedding, Marcus Thornton returned. This time, he brought a lawyer and a federal marshal, claiming that Jenna had stolen $500 from her father and that her engagement to Garrett was a fraudulent attempt to evade justice. The marshal, a stern man named Coleman, came to the boarding house and asked Jenna to accompany him to the sheriff's office. Garrett was at her side immediately. "She is not going anywhere without representation." "And who are you?" Coleman asked. "Garrett Vance, her fiancé. And I am not letting you question her alone." They went to the sheriff's office, where Marcus and his lawyer, a pinch-faced man named Dalton, were waiting. Sheriff Bradshaw looked annoyed by the whole situation. "Miss Zimmerman," Marshal Coleman said, "these men claim you took $500 from your father without permission and fled to Nevada territory to avoid prosecution. What do you have to say to that charge?" "I took money that was owed to me," Jenna said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "My father had been holding my inheritance from my grandmother in his accounts. When he refused to let me leave Philadelphia, I took what was mine and used it to build a new life." "That is a lie," Marcus interjected. "The money belonged to her father. She is a thief." "Do you have proof that the money was yours?" Coleman asked Jenna. "I have a letter from my grandmother's lawyer stating that she left me $600 to be held in trust until my 21st birthday. I turned 21 last November. I only took 500 of the 600, leaving the rest." It was a bluff. Jenna did not have the letter with her, had left it in Philadelphia in her hasty escape. But she was banking on the fact that Marcus and his lawyer would not know that. Dalton frowned. "Even so, taking money without your father's explicit permission could be considered theft." "Not if the money legally belonged to her," Sheriff Bradshaw said. "And unless you can prove otherwise, I am inclined to believe Miss Zimmerman's version of events." "This is absurd," Marcus said, his voice rising. "She is my fiancée. She belongs in Philadelphia with me." "I broke our engagement months ago," Jenna said, looking directly at Marcus for the first time. "I sent you a letter explaining that I could not marry you. If you chose to ignore it, that is your problem, not mine. You cannot break an engagement without mutual consent. Our families had an agreement. Our families are not the ones getting married. I am, and I choose to marry Garrett, not you." Marcus lunged toward her and Garrett stepped between them so fast it was a blur. "Back off," Garrett said, his voice deadly quiet. Marshal Coleman raised a hand. Everyone calm down. Mr. Thornton, I understand you are upset, but threatening behavior will not help your case. I am not threatening anyone. I am trying to reclaim what is mine. She is not property, Garrett said. She is a human being with the right to choose her own future. The lawyer cleared his throat. Marshal Coleman, regardless of the engagement situation, there is still the matter of the stolen money. Coleman looked at Jenna. Do you have this letter from your grandmother's lawyer, something that proves the money was yours? I can write to Philadelphia and have it sent, Jenna said. It may take a few weeks. That is acceptable. In the meantime, I am going to recommend that no charges be filed until we can verify the facts. Miss Zimmerman, I will need you to stay in Pahrump until this is resolved. I have no intention of going anywhere, Jenna said. Marcus looked furious, but Dalton put a hand on his arm. We will wait for the letter, the lawyer said. But Mr. Thornton has every right to remain in town as well, to ensure that Miss Zimmerman does not flee again. The thought of Marcus staying in Pahrump, watching her every move, made Jenna's skin crawl. But there was nothing she could do about it. The meeting ended, and Garrett walked Jenna back to the boarding house. She was shaking with reaction, adrenaline making her feel sick. He is going to make my life hell until that letter arrives, she said. And what if the lawyer will not send it? What if my parents refuse to cooperate? Then we will figure something else out, Garrett said. You are not alone in this, Jenna. We will fight this together. Over the next days, Marcus made his presence known around town. He stayed at the saloon, made loud comments about runaway women and faithless fiancés, tried to turn public opinion against Jenna. Some people listened, but most of the townspeople had grown fond of Jenna and were not swayed by Marcus's charm. Still, it was wearing. Jenna could not go anywhere without feeling his eyes on her. He showed up at the boarding house under various pretexts, forcing Jenna to hide in the kitchen. He followed her to church on Sunday, sitting in the back pew and staring at her throughout the service. Garrett was furious. He is trying to intimidate you. Do not let him win. I am trying. But Garrett, I am scared. What if the letter does not arrive in time? What if they arrest me and send me back to Philadelphia? I will not let that happen. Garrett took her hands, his grip firm and reassuring. Listen to me. If it comes to that, we will get married immediately. As my wife, you would have legal protections. And I will fight anyone who tries to take you away from here. His fierce protectiveness made Jenna feel braver. I do not want to move the wedding up because we are being forced to. I want to marry you because we choose it, not because we have no other option. Then we will wait, Garrett said. But know that I am ready whenever you are. Today, tomorrow, next month. Whenever you say the word, I will be there. Jenna kissed him, putting all her gratitude and love into it. 2 weeks, she said. 2 weeks and I will be your wife. I am counting the days. The letter from Philadelphia arrived 5 days before the wedding. Jenna's hands shook as she opened it, terrified of what it might say. But inside was a copy of her grandmother's will and a notarized letter from the lawyer confirming that Jenna had been entitled to the inheritance and had every right to access it. There was also a brief note from her father. Jenna, your mother and I do not understand your choices, but we cannot stop you from living your own life. The money was yours, as you claimed. We will not press charges. However, do not expect our blessing on this marriage to a common ranch hand. You are throwing away your future and your good name. Your father it hurt, seeing their disapproval laid out so plainly. But it also freed her. She no longer had to wonder if they would ever understand or support her. She could let go of that hope and move forward without it. She took the letter to Marshal Coleman, who reviewed it and declared the matter closed. You are free to go about your business, Miss Zimmerman, and Mr. Thornton will be advised to leave town immediately. Marcus, however, refused to go quietly. That evening he showed up at the boarding house drunk and belligerent, pounding on the door and shouting for Jenna. Garrett was there within minutes, having been alerted by one of the neighbors. "You need to leave," Garrett said, positioning himself between Marcus and the house. "I am not leaving without talking to her. Jenna. Jenna, get out here." Jenna appeared on the porch with Patricia and Sheriff Bradshaw right behind her. "Go home, Marcus. It is over." "It is not over until I say it is over. You humiliated me, dragged my name through the mud with your lies. You owe me." "I owe you nothing." Marcus lurched toward the porch, but Garrett caught him by the arm. "That is enough. You are drunk and making a scene. Go sleep it off." Marcus swung at Garrett, a wild haymaker that Garrett easily ducked. Then Marcus pulled a knife from his belt, and everything happened very fast. Garrett grabbed Marcus's wrist, twisting until the knife fell to the ground. Marcus fought back, but Garrett was sober and trained and had right on his side. Within seconds, Marcus was face down in the dirt with Garrett's knee in his back and Sheriff Bradshaw snapping handcuffs on his wrists. "That is assault with a deadly weapon," Bradshaw said grimly. "You are under arrest, Thornton." Marcus was shouting curses and threats as the sheriff dragged him away, but Jenna barely heard him. She was too focused on Garrett, checking him for injuries, making sure he was all right. "I am fine," Garrett assured her. "He did not even come close to hitting me. He had a knife. He could have killed you, but he did not. It is over, Jenna. He is going to jail and you are safe." Jenna collapsed against him and he held her tight while she cried. All the fear and tension of the past weeks came pouring out and Garrett just stood there and let her purge it, his hand gentle on her back. "I have got you," he murmured. "You are safe. I have got you." Marcus was charged with assault and disturbing the peace, and the judge sentenced him to 30 days in jail followed by immediate departure from the territory. His lawyer, Dalton, left town the next morning, clearly wanting nothing more to do with the whole mess. Jenna felt like she could breathe again. The threat that had been hanging over her was finally, truly gone. The wedding took place on a bright August morning in the small church that served Pahrump. Jenna wore a simple white dress that Patricia had helped her sew, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Garrett had picked himself from the desert. Garrett wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, looking nervous and happy and impossibly handsome. There were about 30 people in attendance, mostly townspeople who had become friends over the past months. Red had been brushed and braided and tied to the fence outside the church, Garrett's wedding gift to Jenna. The mare stood calmly, a testament to how far she had come from the terrified creature in the corral. The ceremony was short and sweet, conducted by the circuit preacher who passed through Pahrump once a month. When it came time for the vows, Jenna looked into Garrett's eyes and felt absolute certainty that she was making the right choice. "I, Jenna, take you, Garrett, to be my husband," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I promise to trust you, to build a life with you, to be your partner in all things. You have shown me what real love looks like, and I will spend the rest of my life showing you the same." Garrett's voice was thick with emotion when he responded. "I, Garrett, take you, Jenna, to be my wife. I promise to protect you, to respect you, to be patient when you need time and strong when you need support. You have taught me that broken things can heal, and I will never stop being grateful that you chose to heal with me." They exchanged simple gold bands that Garrett had bought from the general store, and then the preacher pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," he said with a smile. Garrett cupped Jenna's face in his hands and kissed her softly, reverently, like she was something precious. The small gathering erupted in applause and cheers, and Jenna laughed against Garrett's mouth, feeling joy bubble up inside her like a spring. They were married. She was Mrs. Garrett Vance, and for the first time in her life, Jenna felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The reception was held at Patricia's boarding house, with food and music and dancing. Jenna had never been much of a dancer, but Garrett led her through a simple waltz while someone played fiddle, and she felt like she was floating. "Happy?" Garrett asked, his arms around her waist. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Jenna said honestly. As the sun set and the party wound down, Garrett and Jenna rode out to their new property. Garrett had bought the land a week earlier, and he had been secretly preparing the cabin for their wedding night. When they arrived, Jenna found that he had cleaned and repaired everything, brought in new furniture, and filled the small space with candles and fresh flowers. "Garrett," she breathed, "when did you have time to do all this? I have been working on it every evening after you went to bed. I wanted our first night here to be special." Jenna walked through the little cabin, touching the new curtains, the quilt on the bed, the vase of wildflowers on the table. It was not fancy, but it was theirs, their home, their fresh start. When she turned back to Garrett, he was watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. "I am nervous," she admitted. "About tonight, about being a wife. I want to be with you, but I am also scared." Garrett crossed to her and took her hands. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for. There is no rush, Jenna. We have the rest of our lives." "I want to try," she said. "I trust you, Garrett. I know you will be gentle with me." He kissed her forehead. "Always, I will always be gentle with you." That night, Garrett showed Jenna what tenderness truly meant. He was patient and careful, letting her set the pace, murmuring reassurances and love against her skin. When Jenna tensed or flinched, he stopped immediately, waited for her to relax, never pushed. And gradually, Jenna learned that intimacy did not have to be frightening. It could be beautiful and connecting and safe. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Jenna rested her head on Garrett's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For being patient with me. For gentling me the same way you gentled Red. For showing me what real love looks like." Garrett's arms tightened around her. "You did not need gentling, Jenna. You just needed time and safety to remember who you really are. Strong and brave and capable of anything you set your mind to." Jenna smiled against his skin. "I love you. I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and in the promise of the future they would build together. The next months were filled with hard work and deep happiness. Jenna and Garrett threw themselves into building their ranch, repairing fences, constructing new corrals, and acquiring their first horses. Word spread about Garrett's gift for gentling difficult animals, and people began bringing him horses that others had given up on. Jenna worked alongside him, learning the craft, discovering that she had a natural empathy that the horses responded to. Their first real success story after Red was a stallion named Thunder that had been abused by a traveling show. He was aggressive and violent, had put 2 men in the doctor's care. But Garrett saw potential in him, and with Jenna's help, they slowly brought Thunder back from the edge. It took months of patient work, of consistency and gentleness and refusing to give up. But eventually, Thunder transformed into a steady, reliable mount. As winter approached, Jenna realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complex mixture of joy and terror. She wanted Garrett's child, wanted to build a family with him, but she was also frightened of motherhood, of the responsibility and the vulnerability. When she told Garrett, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. Then he set her down carefully, his hands on her belly. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "Are you ready for that?" Jenna asked. "With you, I am ready for anything." The pregnancy was not easy. Jenna was sick most of the first 3 months, and the Nevada winter was harsh that year with cold winds and occasional snow. But Garrett was attentive and supportive, taking over more of the physical labor, making sure Jenna rested and ate properly. And as her belly grew, so did Jenna's confidence that she could do this, that they could do this together. Their son was born on a bright April morning in 1877, with Patricia serving as midwife. The labor was long and painful, but when Jenna finally held her baby boy in her arms, all of that vanished. He was perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and Garrett's amber eyes. "What should we name him?" Garrett asked, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son. "I was thinking Thomas after my grandmother's father. He was the only person in my family who ever truly supported me pursuing my own happiness." "Thomas Vance," Garrett said, testing out the name. "I love it." Baby Thomas was a good-natured child who slept well and smiled easily. Watching Garrett with their son, seeing the gentleness and patience he brought to fatherhood, made Jenna fall in love with him all over again. He was everything Marcus had not been: present, engaged, tender. As Thomas grew, the ranch grew with him. By the time he was 2 years old, they had a dozen horses and a reputation that reached well beyond Pahrump. People came from all over Nevada territory and beyond to have the Vances gentle their horses. Jenna had become skilled enough that she could handle many of the cases herself, and she found deep satisfaction in helping these damaged animals find their way back to trust. One day, a woman arrived with a mare that reminded Jenna powerfully of Red. The horse was emaciated and scarred, with eyes that showed the same bone-deep terror Jenna had seen in her own reflection 2 years earlier. "Her name is Willow," the woman said. "My husband beat her nearly to death before I finally got the courage to leave him. I brought her with me because I could not stand to leave her in his hands, but I do not know how to help her, and I cannot afford to keep a horse I cannot ride." Jenna looked at Willow and saw herself. She saw Red. She saw every frightened, broken thing that had been gentled back to wholeness through patience and love. "I will take her," Jenna said. "No charge. Consider it a gift from one survivor to another." The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you so much." Gentling Willow took the better part of a year, but Jenna poured her heart into it. Every breakthrough with the mare felt like healing another piece of her own past. And when Willow finally stood calmly while Jenna climbed into the saddle for the first time, Jenna understood that she had come full circle. She was no longer the frightened woman who had arrived in Pahrump 4 years ago. She was strong, capable, whole. That evening, she told Garrett she was pregnant again. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1880, a fierce little thing with Jenna's features and Garrett's stubborn determination. They named her Rose, after the wildflowers that bloomed in the desert every spring, beautiful and resilient despite the harsh environment. Life settled into a rhythm that felt like contentment. The ranch prospered. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the horses as much as his parents did. Rose was a handful from the start, always getting into things, always pushing boundaries, but she had a tender heart beneath the bluster. Red, now an elderly mare, spent her days in the pasture with Willow and the other retired horses, living out her years in peace and safety. Jenna visited her often, bringing treats and brushing her coat, silently thanking her for being the mirror that had helped Jenna see herself clearly. One evening in late summer, when Thomas was 7 and Rose was 4, the family sat on the porch of their expanded home and watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. Garrett had his arm around Jenna, and the children were playing with a litter of puppies one of the ranch dogs had produced. "You ever think about Philadelphia?" Garrett asked quietly. "Sometimes," Jenna admitted, "but not with regret, more like thinking about a different person's life. The girl I was then, she does not exist anymore." Do you miss her? No. She was so afraid, so convinced she was helpless. I like who I am now so much better. Garrett kissed her temple. I am proud of you, of everything you have become, everything you have built. We built it together, Jenna corrected. I could not have done any of this without you. I think you are stronger than you give yourself credit for, but I am glad I got to be part of your journey. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Jenna thought about how far she had come, how many impossible things had become reality. She had escaped an abusive engagement, traveled across the country alone, built a new life from nothing. She had learned to gentle horses, to run a business, to be a wife and mother. She had transformed from a frightened victim into a confident, capable woman. And it had all started with a terrified horse and a patient cowboy who knew that healing could not be rushed. That trust had to be earned. That gentleness was not weakness but the greatest strength of all. I love you, Jenna said to Garrett, the words as true now as they had been on their wedding day. I love you too, he replied. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that. As the stars emerged overhead, Jenna felt a bone-deep sense of peace. This was home. This was family. This was the life she had built from the ashes of her past, and it was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. The years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to the life Jenna and Garrett had created. Thomas grew into a young man who had his father's gift with horses and his mother's empathetic nature. Rose became a spirited young woman who could outride most of the ranch hands they employed, and who had no patience for anyone who tried to tell her what she could or could not do because of her gender. The ranch itself became something of a legend in Nevada. The Vance Ranch, where broken horses were made whole, where people brought their most difficult animals and found not just training, but transformation. Jenna and Garrett had developed a method that combined Garrett's natural talent with Jenna's hard-won understanding of trauma and recovery. They wrote articles for farming journals, gave demonstrations at county fairs, and trained a new generation of horse handlers in their techniques. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Garrett surprised Jenna with a trip to San Francisco. It was the farthest she had traveled since leaving Philadelphia, and the city was overwhelming in its size and noise and crowds. But Garrett held her hand through all of it, and they explored the bustling streets together, marveling at the cable cars and the grand buildings and the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront, Garrett said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "We have built something really special at the ranch. Our methods work, not just for horses but for the people who work with them. I think we should formalize it somehow, maybe write a book, share what we have learned with a wider audience." Jenna considered this. The idea of putting their story into words was daunting, but also appealing. "You think people would want to read it?" "I think there are a lot of broken things and broken people in this world who could benefit from understanding that healing is possible, that patience and gentleness can overcome almost anything." So they wrote the book together, working on it during the quiet winter evenings when the ranch work slowed down. It was called The Way of Gentling, Healing Horses and Healing Hearts, and it combined practical horse training advice with Jenna's reflections on trauma, recovery, and the power of patient love. The book was published in 1885 and became modestly successful, particularly among women who saw in Jenna's story a reflection of their own struggles. Jenna received letters from all over the country, from women who had survived abuse, who had fled bad situations, who were trying to rebuild their lives. She answered every letter personally, offering encouragement and advice, creating a network of survivors supporting survivors. One letter came from Philadelphia, from a woman Jenna had known slightly in her old life. The woman wrote that she had read the book and finally found the courage to leave her violent husband, inspired by Jenna's example. Reading that letter, Jenna cried with a mixture of sadness and pride. Sadness for the woman's suffering, pride that her story could help others find their way to freedom. "You have saved more than just horses," Garrett said when she showed him the letter. "We have saved them," Jenna corrected. "None of this would exist without you." He pulled her into his arms. "We make a good team, Mrs. Vance." "The best team," she agreed. When Jenna was 42 years old, her mother wrote to her for the first time in over 15 years. The letter was brief and formal, informing Jenna that her father had passed away and leaving her a small inheritance. There was no apology for the years of silence, no acknowledgement of the pain they had caused her. But there was a postscript that caught Jenna's attention. "I read your book. I do not understand all of it, but I am glad you found happiness. Perhaps I was wrong about some things. I hope you can forgive me." It was not much, but it was something. Jenna wrote back an equally brief letter, accepting the inheritance and offering her condolences. She did not have the energy or desire to rebuild a relationship with her mother, but she could offer forgiveness. Holding on to anger would only hurt herself, and she had learned long ago that healing required letting go of the past. Thomas married at 23, bringing home a sweet-natured girl named Sarah who loved the ranch and fit into the family as if she had always been there. Rose, true to form, announced at 19 that she had no intention of marrying anyone. She was going to travel the country giving demonstrations of advanced horsemanship. Jenna and Garrett, understanding their daughter's fierce independence, gave her their blessing and enough money to get started. Red passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 28, and they buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple marker. "Red, she taught us that broken things can heal." Jenna grieved deeply for the horse that had been such an important part of her journey, but she also celebrated the long, peaceful life Red had enjoyed after her rescue. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Jenna and Garrett sat on that same porch where they had spent so many evenings, watching the sun set over their land. They were older now, with silver threads in their hair and lines earned from years of laughter and hard work. But the love between them had only deepened with time. "You ever regret it?" Jenna asked. "Tying yourself to a broken woman all those years ago?" Garrett turned to look at her, his amber eyes still as warm as the day they met. "You were never broken, Jenna. You were wounded, which is different. Broken things cannot grow or change, but you grew into the most remarkable woman I have ever known. Strong, compassionate, brave. How could I possibly regret being part of that? I was so afraid back then, afraid of everything, especially of trusting you. And I was patient because I knew you were worth waiting for, just like Red was worth waiting for, worth the time it took to earn her trust." Jenna smiled. "You gentled me the same way you gentled her." "No," Garrett said firmly. "I did not gentle you. I just gave you a safe space to heal yourself. You did all the hard work, Jenna. You chose to trust again, chose to love again, chose to build this life. I just had the privilege of being there while you did it." Jenna leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the same sense of peace and safety she had felt every day for the past 20 years. "I love you, Garrett Vance. I love you too, Jenna Vance, more than words can say." As the stars began to emerge, they heard horses nickering in the pasture, the sound of their grandchildren laughing in the house behind them, the soft evening breeze rustling through the sage. This was their legacy. Not just a successful ranch, not just a book or a reputation, but a family built on love and patience and the understanding that healing takes time. Jenna thought about the terrified girl who had arrived in Pahrump all those years ago, running from a monster, convinced she would never be safe or whole again. She wished she could tell that girl that everything would be all right, that she would find a good man who would cherish her, that she would build a life beyond her wildest dreams. But maybe that girl had known on some level when she watched Garrett in the corral with Red. Maybe she had recognized in him the patience and gentleness she so desperately needed. Maybe, even in her fear, she had seen the possibility of healing. The years continued their steady march. Thomas took over more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, allowing Jenna and Garrett to step back slightly, to enjoy their grandchildren and the fruits of their decades of labor. Rose returned from her travels with stories of adventure and a wife she had met in California, a writer named Margaret who fit into the family as naturally as breathing. Jenna and Garrett welcomed her without question, proud of Rose for living her truth even when the world did not always understand. The ranch continued to thrive, now operated by the third generation of Vances, with Thomas's children showing the same natural empathy with horses that their grandparents had possessed. The methods Jenna and Garrett had developed were now taught in agricultural colleges across the West, and their book remained in print, still helping people and animals find their way to healing. On a warm spring morning in 1896, when Jenna was 62 and Garrett 65, they rode out together into the desert, following the same trail they had ridden on their first adventure together 30 years earlier. They moved more slowly now, their bodies not as flexible as they once were, but their spirits were as connected as ever. At the top of the hill, where the desert spread out in all directions, they dismounted and sat on the same flat rock, holding hands and watching the endless sky. "I have been thinking about what comes next," Garrett said quietly. "What do you mean?" "The ranch is in good hands with Thomas. Rose is happy. Our grandchildren are thriving. We have built something that will last beyond us. So I have been thinking maybe it is time for us to have our own adventure. Travel a bit, see the ocean again, visit places we have always talked about but never made time for." Jenna considered this. The idea of leaving the ranch, even temporarily, felt strange after so many years. But it also felt right. They had earned the freedom to explore, to enjoy the time they had left without the weight of constant responsibility. "I think that sounds wonderful," she said. "Where should we go first?" "Anywhere you want. The whole world is open to us." They sat there planning and dreaming, talking about trains and ships and cities they had only read about in books. And as they talked, Jenna felt the same sense of possibility she had felt on her wedding day, the same certainty that with Garrett beside her, she could face anything. They made several trips over the next few years, seeing Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon, traveling to Portland and Seattle, even taking a ship to Alaska. Each journey was an adventure, each new place a discovery. But they always came home to Nevada, to the ranch and the family and the life they had built. Garrett's health began to decline when he was 72. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for decades. Jenna watched it happen with sorrow but also with gratitude for every day they had together. She tended him with the same patience and gentleness he had shown her so many years ago, and he accepted her care with grace. One evening, as she helped him to bed, he said, "I want you to know something." "What is that?" "Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Every day with you has been a gift, Jenna. Even the hard days, even the sad days. All of it has been worth it because I got to share it with you." Jenna's eyes filled with tears. "You saved my life, Garrett. You showed me what love really means." "No," he said, cupping her face with a hand that trembled slightly. "We saved each other. That is what love does. It heals us by giving us someone to heal with." He passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 months later. surrounded by his family, in the home he had built with his own hands. Jenna sat beside him holding his hand, feeling the moment his spirit left his body, feeling the profound emptiness of the world without him in it. The grief was enormous, a tidal wave that threatened to drown her. But Jenna had learned long ago how to weather storms. She had her children and grandchildren, her ranch and her horses, her memories of 41 beautiful years with the man she loved. And she had the knowledge that she had loved well and been loved well in return. She lived another 8 years, remaining active in the ranch and continuing to work with horses almost until the end. Her mind stayed sharp, her heart stayed open, and she never stopped missing Garrett but also never stopped celebrating the life they had shared. On a morning in early spring, when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom, Jenna passed away quietly in her sleep. She was 79 years old. They buried her next to Garrett on the hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky so vast and blue, it seemed to contain all the possibilities of the world. At her funeral, Rose stood before the gathered crowd and read from their parents' book. Healing takes time. It cannot be rushed or forced. But with patience, consistency, and genuine love, even the most frightened souls can learn to trust again. The key is not to break what is damaged, but to gentle it, to create a space so safe, so steady that healing can happen naturally. This is true for horses. This is true for people. This is true for all of us who carry wounds we did not deserve and fears we cannot name. We can heal. We can learn to trust. We can become whole. Thomas added his own words. Our parents taught us that love is patient, love is gentle, and love never gives up. They lived those principles every day of their lives. They took broken things and made them whole, not just horses but people, not just strangers but each other. They showed us that the strongest love is not the kind that burns hot and fast, but the kind that glows steady and warm through all the years, through all the challenges, never wavering. After the service, the family released a beautiful sorrel mare into the pasture where Red had spent her final years. The mare was a rescue, abused and terrified, and the family would gentle her using the methods Jenna and Garrett had perfected. It was a fitting tribute, a continuation of the legacy they had built. The Vance Ranch continued for generations, always maintaining the core principles of patience and gentleness that Jenna and Garrett had established. Their book remained in print for over a century, inspiring countless people to see healing as possible, trauma as survivable, and love as the greatest force for transformation. And somewhere in the desert of Nevada, under the endless sky, the spirits of a man and a woman who had found each other in darkness and built a life in light rested peacefully together. Their love story echoing through time as a testament to the power of gentleness, the strength of patience, and the transformative miracle of choosing to trust again despite every reason not to. They had taken their wounds and turned them into wisdom. They had taken their fear and transformed it into courage. They had taken brokenness and made it whole, not through force or speed, but through the steady, consistent application of love, just like gentling a frightened horse, just like healing a wounded heart. One patient moment at a time until trust was rebuilt and wholeness was restored, and two souls who had been damaged by life found in each other the safety to become who they were always meant to be. That was their legacy. That was their story. And it was beautiful.